hairspray. It doesn't matter at all to me. What I'd like to do today is talk a little bit about the new D. Gary Young Research Institute. Now in June we announced that we were changing the name of research and development at Young Living to the D. Gary Young Research Institute. And the reason we wanted to do that was twofold. The first is to remind all of our scientists working in research and development that they are constantly working to Gary's standards, to Gary's vision, to Gary's creativity. And in order to do that, we thought we would rename every lab at Young Living. And here's what it looks like actually. We put these logos on the doors to every laboratory now in research and development, so that we don't have a single scientist enter the room without thinking about Gary. Most of the scientists in R&D actually worked side by side with Gary, some of them for many years. Rex Kidman, I think, worked with Gary for 23 years. Obviously, we have some newer folks who worked a little less, but everyone keeps Gary in mind all the time. The second reason that we wanted to use this logo of the D. Gary Young Research Institute is to ensure that your products have met all of Gary's high standards as we go forward. So this logo will now be appearing on all of our products as we move forward. This is where it will appear. It'll be close to the label deck. I'm giving you a little bit of a secret here. This is our Australian Piranha blend, which we just launched in the US. And it's really sort of mean to me to show it to you because it's not yet here, but I promise you it will be here in a few months. We're just waiting for the regulatory paperwork. Now, I've split the Institute kind of into two distinct groups. One is responsible for research, and one is responsible for development. And I did that to allow the scientists to actually focus more on their particular roles. And it also allows us to place the scientists into the positions where they're most expert. Typically, I talk about research. The folks in product development told me this time that I'd better talk about product development a little bit. So here it is. We do product development in a stage gate fashion. We use 4 stages. The first stage is really just sort of coming up with a thought, something that we think consumers like you might need or certain regions of the world might need. And then that moves in to what we call stage 2. Stage 2 is where we do a lot of the hard work. This is where we actually do the formulation work in the laboratory. We do a lot of what we call ideation, what the product should look like, what the final format should be, how it should be packaged. We do market research. We do ingredient research. That's very important because you can't just throw everything in a bottle, right? You have to make sure that ingredients are compatible with one another. Jared gave a great example of this to us the other day. He was opening his drain at home and he poured 2 different drain openers down the drain and he ended up almost killing himself because it blew up with some kind of poisonous gas. So by the time we get through the laboratory formulation work, we've spent probably close to a year. Okay, this is a very slow, very laborious, very tedious process. But we want to make sure that we get it right, because it's always better to do it right than to do it fast. Okay? So at the end of stage 2, we end up with a formulation which we can have approved either by myself or other executives. A lot of times Mary takes a look at that formula, and then it moves into stage 3. And stage 3 can take anywhere up to another year. In stage 3, one of the most important things we do is a pilot run. Now, I don't know if many of you know about pilot runs, but they're incredibly critical for what we do. Pilot runs are where we take the small lab batch that we mixed up in a beaker and we transfer it. It's the first step in transferring it to the actual manufacturing scale. So we move in a pilot run from something like maybe a liter of product on the lab to about 50,000 liters in a pilot run. Typically, pilot runs are 1/10 the size of a full manufacturing run, but they're done on all the equipment that we would use for full manufacturing. And that's very important for us. We have to understand how the formulations work when we run it on large-scale equipment, because very often the mixers and the pumps and the actual vessels that we create the product in can have a big difference on what the final product output looks like. So if we use a small mixer in a lab and then use a large mixer in a factory, it can be very different. So those pilot runs are incredibly important. We also use the pilot runs to produce enough sample to actually do a lot of testing. And I'll come back to some of our testing in a few minutes, but this is where we do things like stability testing, where we see how the product will hold up over time. And we also do our efficacy testing, and as well as a lot of our safety testing and quality testing in general. After stage 3, okay, after using probably 2 years, maybe 2.5 years of effort, it finally moves to stage 4, which is the manufacturing phase. After we manufacture the batches, what do? They go back and they're retested. And we do a lot of testing on these final batches. This is where our human testing comes in. Did you know that we have done 33 human clinical studies since last year on our products at Young Living? I don't think there's any other essential oil company that's done anything close to that. Actually, that number is wrong, because I was just informed on the way here that we finished up 2 more clinicals, so we're up to 35 human studies. Okay? And you can see we do all sorts of different studies. There's things like hypoallergenicity, there's things like non-comedogenicidity, phototoxicity, skin irritation, ocular irritation, and imaging studies. Imaging studies are really close to my heart. These are the one study that I think are really important for us to share with you, because pictures of how our products work, I think, are really important. So let me give you an example of an imaging study. This product. Yeah, you've heard of it, right? So on the mascara products, we did a lot of imaging studies to see how the mascara applied or transferred to eyelashes. We actually had a room in the laboratory set up that was filled with nothing but artificial eyelashes. And it was kind of creepy when you walked in. But we had someone in there who was painting or applying the mascara on the artificial eyelashes. And we were changing the formulas accordingly to see which one applied best. So let me show you, this is just one example. We have literally hundreds of these photos. But you can see, I think, on the top left, we applied a batch that was very dry. It just didn't flow well, and you can see the results. On the bottom right, we applied one that was too wet, and you can see the results. And on the top right, we got one that was just about right, and that's the one that you'll be able to buy now. But I think you can see how these visual images, these happen to be low magnification. They're only magnified 10 times. But I think you can see how useful they really are for us to judge how a product like this works. We also did studies on real people. I tried to volunteer for this, they wouldn't let me. So we had a bunch of women come in with different types of eyelashes. And I'm sure all of you in the audience, at least the women, know that eyelashes are very different from person to person, and that mascara covers those eyelashes differently. Everything's different on every person. And you can see here, what we did in this study was actually compare our product to a number of so-called, and I do say so-called, natural competitors. Every one of those, I can tell you, has at least one artificial ingredient, but they claim to be natural. But these are major competitors that we wanted to see how our product performed against. And I think you can see here that the Savvy product over on the far left really looks quite nice in this study. Now again, these are just examples. Okay? We tested hundreds of women's eyes for this product before we decided which one to launch. But again, you know, it kind of illustrates, especially for cosmetics, that a picture is worth 1,000 words. We can really learn a lot from these imaging studies. Now let me just make a few suggestions. Let's take this a step further and talk about how some of these studies can work for you. Incidentally, we'll be publishing these images and you'll be able to use them to talk about the product with your friends as you explain the product. But let me show you a few things that you can actually do in your own home. Simple kind of imaging experiments. This is marshmallow. Does marshmallow translate here? Do you know what marshmallow is? Yeah. So if any of you have kids, it's the stuff you have to scrape off the car seats. It's a sticky cooked sugar. It's just a horrible mess, quite frankly. But this is a great example of something that we did with Thieves Household Cleaner. Over here, we smeared marshmallow on a glass plate, and we saturated a cloth with water, and we just ran the cloth through it. And you can see it removed some of the marshmallow. Same marshmallow on the same plate with Thieves Household Cleaner on it. And you can see how much better the Thieves Household Cleaner removed that sticky, sugary mess. These are very, very simple little experiments, but I think they're powerful demonstrations that you can use to show just how well our products really work. Here's one I like a little better. Here we took a piece of glass and we drew on it with a lab marker or a glass marker. On the left, you can see that we tried to wipe off the glass marker with water with no effect. On the right, very light wiping with some Thieves Household Cleaner, and the marker came right off. So I love these kinds of visual differences, and I encourage you to use them. And frankly, if you think of any great little home experiments, send them through because we'll share them with everyone, okay? Because I think these are really important. Now, let's move on. I'll bet all of you lay awake at night just wondering how we establish when products expire, don't you? Well, I do. Nerds like me do. Most people don't. But the reason I want to share this with you is it's very, very important, even though most people really don't think much about it. Young Living has actually invested millions of dollars in specific testing methodology to allow us to establish exactly when products expire, and therefore allow us to stamp products with expiry dates when needed. This is some of the equipment we use. These are called accelerated stability testing chambers. You're looking at 10 of them in this particular photo. We have 15 of them at our laboratory in Spanish Fork, Utah. These particular ones are about the size of a refrigerator. And what they are is basically storage cabinets. And we put our finished products in these cabinets, and then we are able to adjust the conditions in the cabinets to kind of stress the products. So for example, we can increase the humidity in these cabinets, we can increase the temperature, and we can increase the pressure if we want to. Now we don't just have cabinets, we also have very large sort of rooms that we call accelerated stability chambers. And inside these rooms you can see there's lots of shelves, and we can put products in there. And we put the products in these rooms for many, many months. And then each month we take a product out of these stressed conditions and we check to see if it's degrading chemically, if it's separating physically, or if it's growing any bacteria, mold, or yeast microbiologically. Okay, so we do lots of testing on these products. So basically what we're doing here, in this particular room actually, it was set at 40 degrees C and 70% relative humidity. And these products were in there for about 9 months, and we checked them periodically to see how the products are holding up. And there's actually some very elaborate mathematical algorithms that have been developed that allow us to very accurately predict the shelf life of a product based on its behavior in these accelerated conditions. For example, at 40 degrees centigrade and 70% humidity, if a product lasts for 3 months, if it's stable for 3 months, that translates to 1 year under normal ambient conditions. So we can put a 1-year expiry date on that product if it lasts in here for 3 months. If it goes 6 months, that's 2 years. If it goes 9 months, that's 3 years. And that's how we do it. And I don't want to get into I'm probably already into the boring details. I was going to say I don't want to get into the boring details. But as I said, there is a very precise mathematical algorithm that was actually developed by this fellow back in the late 1800s. His name's Svante Arrhenius. And this gentleman developed something called the Arrhenius equation, which I expect you all to memorize. And that relates chemical stability or chemical reactivity to temperature and energy, which is heat. Okay, so this is the equation that's been used by regulatory agencies, by most corporations for the last 100 years, and it holds very true, and it allows us to very accurately and precisely predict when a product will expire. I also wanted to show you this picture just to prove that most good scientists have a mustache. Okay, so that's a very important thing to note as well. Incidentally, just to show you how important this work that Arrhenius did was to the world, he was actually awarded the Nobel Prize in 1903 for this. So this was a big deal when it happened, and it continues to be a big deal for us today. Now, as I said, products go into these chambers and then we take them out periodically and we test them. And to test them, we need methods. But there's an issue with analytical methods, and that is that they are usually developed by R&D in one lab, and then they are transferred to a quality control lab. And you can't just simply say, well, here's a method, go use it. There's a very rigorous system that we use to transfer methods. This is what a method transfer data package looks like at Young Living. It's actually a book with all of the details of what needs to be done to make sure that that method's working properly when you move it from one lab to another. And again, this is something that I think most people don't realize we do. Most people never think about it, but it's absolutely critical because we need to continually develop new analytical methods as we develop new products. We need ways of testing the new products. So this happens to be one for the analysis of B vitamins and caffeine in all sorts of Young Living products. And when you go into this book, you'll see all kinds of incredibly exciting details. But I just wanted to show you this quickly to show you sort of the rigor that our scientists need to go through to transfer a method. They need to show that what was linear on one method, meaning sort of the range that the method can detect, the amount of ingredients the method can detect. What was linear in one lab and one method is linear the same way in a different lab using different operators on different instruments. They look at precision, they look at accuracy, and incidentally, those two things are different. A lot of people think that precision and accuracy are the same. They're really not. I can illustrate it best, I think, this way. These darts over here all landed in the same spot. That's high precision. Each one was the same as the next, but they're not accurate. They missed the target. These are both accurate and precise. So there's a difference. Accuracy is how close you get to the actual number in an analytical method, and precision is how many times you can produce that, going over and over again. So, we go back to this, we do specificity, we do robustness, which is can the method work on different instruments and be done by different people, and it goes on and on. To do a method transfer can take up to 6 months. So this is a lot of work. It's done in the D. Gary Young Research Institute and quality control, and this is work that you never see, but it involves many, many hours and a lot of skilled scientists to transfer these methods. Now, when we do an analytical method, we have to have something to compare our test sample to. So we need standards. We always use a method and we say, yeah, this sample compares well to this standard, and then it's okay. Or it doesn't compare well to the standard, we start over again. So we do a lot of work developing and measuring standards as well. Luckily for us, there's an international organization that actually does a lot of standard work for the world. and it's called ISO, the International Organization for Standardization. And it's made up of a collection of scientists from different member companies. I think there's now 162 national standards groups participating in ISO. And it is their sole job to develop good standards for products that people make. Okay. Now, if you've never met anyone from ISO, I suggest you do it because they are really fascinating people. No. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Let's face it, I mean, coming up with standards is not the most exciting thing to do in the world, but it's critically important. If we didn't have standards, we wouldn't know what to compare our products to, and we wouldn't know what's good, and we wouldn't know what's bad. So, big shout out to ISO. They're boring, but they're important. That one gets applause? Really? Oh, thanks. Am I blushing? This is actually what an ISO report looks like. So if, for example, we want to test peppermint, we can actually buy the ISO standard report for peppermint. And you get a book that looks like this, and inside there's all sorts of fascinating reading like this. But I wanted to show this to you because it very specifically calls out the tests you should use and the results you should get if it's pure peppermint. So they talk about things like the appearance and the color and the refractive index, and then it gets more involved, and they even show you what a gas chromatogram of peppermint should look like. And they label each of the peaks in the gas chromatogram to show you which compounds should be present in pure peppermint and at what level they should exist. So this is incredibly helpful for us because we can just purchase these ISO standards and then we know that we are testing against the worldwide standard for certain products. Now, this is Young Living. Yeah, so there's a slight catch to this. There's a bit of a caveat. We do use ISO standards, but quite frankly, we think a lot of the products that we sell are even more pure than the ones ISO tests.
Wow!
And in fact, ISO has contacted us on several occasions for our analyses to use as some of their standards. The other thing is,
Wow.
This is Young Living. Right? And we are the largest essential oil company in the world. And what follows from that is we are the best essential oil company in the world. And what that means to the scientists is that, frankly, we have all kinds of products that we make. I shouldn't say that. Nature makes our products. Anyway, we have all kinds of products that ISO doesn't even know exist. So we don't have a lot of ISO standards for a lot of the oils that you use. So that means that we make our own standards. And this is something else that occupies a lot of time and a lot of expense and a lot of expertise in the D. Gary Young Research Institute. Here's what we do. We have a multitude of these very small distillation apparatus in the laboratory. And we actually source plants from either our own farms or known partner farm suppliers. And we genetically identify those plants to make sure that it is the plant we really think it is, and it's the correct species and variety of the plant. And then we bring them to the lab and we distill them ourselves. And we may distill these 20 times until we get it right. We vary the distillation parameters and we test the oils. And then we change it again and we test the oils. And eventually what happens is we get a standard set of results for a particular known oil that we've identified. And that becomes the standard that we use to test all of our subsequent oils against. Now, The guys and the ladies back at the lab asked me to share this with you. This is by no means a complete list, but they wanted me to show you the types of standards that we've created over the last 2 years. Since I arrived, I implemented this program, and they've really been working hard. In fact, it's nowhere near complete. We've done over 205 different standards, which only Young Living knows and only Young Living owns. Okay? We're the only ones who know how these genetically pure plants produce oils and what the markers are that we should be looking for in these oils. But just to name a few, there's obviously eucalyptus at the top. There's all sorts of Roman chamomile, valerian root, a few more. There's wintergreen, there's clove bud, peppermint. We do our own peppermint because I said we think our peppermint is actually purer than some of the USP or the ISO standards. And you know, you can go down this list, and I could name all 200. I'm not going to, but nutmeg, spearmint, elemi, kunzea. Kunzea is one of my favorites. Has anybody tried kunzea?
Woo!
I stood up at our convention in Salt Lake City this summer, and I told people about kunzea. And it was just so amazing because as I started to talk about it, I realized that kunzea is really nature's miracle. So let me just spend a few moments talking about this particular one. I love to distill it. This is where it comes from. This is Kunzea ambigua. This is the kunzea plant. Oh, sorry, my slide here does not match my slide here. Am I going? Try that. There's kunzea. Okay. The important thing about kunzea to me is where it grows. It's native to Australia, but it's particularly found in high concentration in Tasmania. And I just love looking at the map. If you look at this, there's Tasmania. Could that be any more remote? I mean, it's literally the corner of the world, isn't it? That's beautiful to me. It's so remote. It's so pure. It's so isolated from human contact and human pollution. And in fact, we go one step further. We actually source our kunzea from a small island called Fiddler's Island, which is off the northeast coast of Tasmania. And this is what it looks like. This is where we get kunzea. Isn't that beautiful? There's the kunzea plant growing wild on Fiddler's Island. We do cultivate the wild plant, but our partner farm there is now working diligently to actually see if, we harvest the wild plant. We're working diligently to see if we can actually cultivate the plant now for a more sustainable supply. And that's what it looks like. We're just beginning to grow it there. But this is just an absolutely amazing plant that produces an amazing oil. Let me tell you why. Tasmania's got all kinds of great, interesting critters and plants, right? Do you all know this animal?
Tasmanian devil.
This is what we used to call my youngest daughter when she was 2 years old. This is a Tasmanian devil.
I see.
Right? And he looks pretty cute there, but they can cause some problems. Now, Tasmania has wild animals, but it also has a lot of domestic animals. There are a lot of farmers there and cattle ranchers. And what I want you to notice in this picture isn't actually the animal, it's the fence in front of the animal. Okay? Because there's a really interesting story that a rancher in Tasmania noticed that has to do with kunzea. Now that fence is made of barbed wire, which is a very inexpensive metal. And when it's exposed to the elements for about 3 months, it looks like this. It rusts. Okay? And I think we all know that rust is actually oxidation. Okay? So this metal has oxidized very quickly. There was a cattle rancher in Tasmania who noticed that when that barbed wire was sort of strung through kunzea bushes, or when the bushes grew around it and touched the wire, it looked like this.
Wow.
It's not oxidized, right? What's the logical implication? Convencion must be loaded with all kinds of powerful antioxidants. It actually prevented defense from oxidizing. Great story. I'm not actually sure if it's true because it's one of those things that have been passed down over the years, but it's a fantastic little story, and most stories have some basis in truth. Here's what we do know. We know that the ancient people of Tasmania, the Aboriginal tribes, traditionally used this product to soothe irritated skin and to relieve